Good vibrations.
Welcome along to Volume 118, and just before we get into the detail of this episode, a few updates on stuff that's been happening my end in terms of my work output. I'm very happy to say that the writing of Musical Truth Volume 2 is now complete. I finished that a couple of weeks ago, and all the text is now with the publisher, waiting to be typeset. There's some pictures along with the wordage this time around, and the whole thing came in at around 122,000 words. So it's not quite as much a doorstop as Volume 1, but it's still pretty bulky nevertheless. So that's going to be on the streets in January in hardback, paperback and Kindle versions like last time. Also this time around I'm going to be doing an audio version of the book via Audible, where I'm going to narrate the whole thing. I've got my honey and lemon and throat sweets at the ready. So for anyone that enjoys getting their information in that form as they drive around or go about their business, as I do, that will be another way to get it as of the new year. From February, I'm looking to get back on the talk circuit big time in the UK and beyond, doing a whole load of talks based on new content from the book and a bunch of radio interviews as well. Just want to mention a couple of conferences upcoming. The Open Minds Ireland conference takes place at the Dooley's Hotel in Waterford from the 2nd to the 4th of March 2018. I'm very happy to be a part of that one. I was at the 2017 event and it was an awesome gathering of like minds. This one is going to be just as good. Whole bunch of speakers on the bill. So anyone that can get themselves to Ireland for that, that's going to be a really good option. Then the following weekend, Saturday 10th of March, I'm going to be out in Phoenix, Arizona, courtesy of my dude Ivan from Phoenix. He's got a brand new event called Truth, Mind, Reality. Again, a whole bunch of different speakers on the bill for that one, and I'm very happy to be presenting aspects of the book at it. A few days later, on the 14th of March, I'm going to be in Los Angeles doing a bookstore launch for Musical Truth 2. The exact details of the venue and other aspects are yet to be confirmed, so keep an eye on the website for that. But anyone in the LA area that can get along to that on the 14th of March, it'll be great to see you at it. Just want to mention Spreaker, which is my new home for all my audio output. People might well be listening to this on Spreaker, but if you're listening via YouTube or iTunes or some other outlet, then Spreaker is the new one-stop shop home for all my audio output. Every episode of Good Vibrations, every episode of The Sound of Freedom, all my radio interviews from the past few years, and shortly I'm going to be uploading a bunch of my vintage radio shows and some old school club gigs. And this all occurred when I was basically kicked off of SoundCloud earlier this year on some copyright BS, and they shut me down and I basically lost everything I'd ever uploaded and had to start again from scratch, and it was a pain in the arse to start with, but in retrospect it was the best thing that could have happened because Spreaker is a really great output. It's very user friendly and it's a wonderful portal to be on. Very happy with it. And I've got to shout out my man Simon Gudgeon for all his great help in getting all the stuff re-uploaded, which was much appreciated. Good Vibrations and The Sound of Freedom are now available via iTunes as well. There's an RSS feed through to that. You might well be listening via iTunes, but if that's your preferred method of subscription, you can find me on there as well with both of those. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/MarkDevlinTV, and a brilliant thing about Spreaker is that it automatically pulls through any new audio uploads and puts it onto my YouTube channel. So there's a whole load of stuff there alongside the conference talks and other things that I had in terms of radio shows available for listening via YouTube. So that's youtube.com/MarkDevlinTV. There's a Facebook group for Musical Truth if people want to join that and be a part of things there. I post up regular updates concerning stuff connected to the book's content. So just look for Musical Truth in Facebook groups. On Twitter, you'll find me as musical_truth_. There was a few other musical truths floating around out there I was amused to find, but the one you find me at is the one with the underscores. And when it comes to Instagram and Snapchat, quite frankly, I can't be asked. There's only so many hours in the day, and I've got my opinions as to what those two sites are all about anyway, so I'll leave those alone. But that's where you find me for everything else, and of course the one-stop shop for all of it is markdevlin.co.uk, which links through to all the other sites. On to today's episode then, and I've got a returning guest in the form of Issac Weishaupt, who is the proprietor of IlluminatiWatcher.com, a really great resource online. It's been of invaluable assistance to me in assimilating a lot of the information that I deal with, and he's also written a few books as well, which are really well put together. He gets into dark occult symbolism and esoteric metaphysical aspects of the music and entertainment industries, and he's also a big fan of hip-hop, or has been over the years, and that's loosely what our conversation is going to be rooted in today. So for anyone that doesn't care for hip-hop, and judging by contemporary output that passes for that genre, I couldn't blame you, I would urge you not to just automatically switch off, but do stick around and take a listen, because what we're talking about is the hip-hop scene being used for many of the agendas that are being rolled out by the social engineers, the controllers, the manipulators of culture. And it can be viewed pretty much as a microcosm of what's happening in entertainment and culture generally. For some reason, the so-called hip-hop scene has been selected as, a portal for many of these nefarious activities to be rolled out through, all aimed at the malleable subconscious minds of the young people that listen to this stuff. So, it's important to get a grasp of how all this stuff is done and to find out the ways in which we're all being tricked and manipulated. So I would urge everyone to take on board the information that he's presenting today. So let's cross over to IlluminatiWatcher.com in the US with our returning guest, Issac Weishaupt. Welcome back, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on again, Mark. I appreciate it.
And not everyone realises that you are the great-great-great-great-grandson of Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Bavarian Illuminati, of course.
Absolutely. I'm out here to use propaganda and disinformation to get the Illuminati agenda perpetuated into the masses through deception.
Well, exactly. So you and I last spoke on this show around about 3 years ago, I think. I had you on when you just brought out your book, Sacrifice Magic Behind the Mic, which was very revelatory, and we talked about some of the dark aspects of the hip-hop game. I feel we might be revisiting some of those today.
Yeah, I think you and I kind of have a similar interest in this realm of hip-hop. I actually have always been a fan. For those that aren't familiar with who I am or my story, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and in the 90s was, when I was more familiar with music, and that was like kind of the time period of Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, and that was kind of the beginning of gangster rap being mainstreamed, and that's kind of what set my sort of tastes and preferences for music. So I'd like to say I come by this honestly, but I've always been interested in rap music. It's always been kind of like my favorite my genre of music. But I've been indoctrinated from a child, because I think Dr. Dre The Chronic came out when I was, I'm gonna say, roughly 12 to 13 years old, and I remember my friend brought it over on cassette tape back then. And he played it on my little stereo, and I was like, what is this? Because they were using the N-word and, cussing, talking about guns. And, I was familiar with NWA before that, but not really. I never really listened to them. But it was when Dr. Dre The Chronic came out that I really got absorbed into rap music. So, with that being said, I've always listened to it since the early 90s. Now, when I I'm not going to say became woke, but when I started exploring and researching this realm of the occult and conspiracies, I started to realize that my interests in not just music, but film and everything else, for years, I've been sort of led astray and manipulated by entertainment. Now, I'm not going to say I'm fully immune to it, because I still listen to rap music. I still listen to the kind of garbage being churned out today. And it's a guilty pleasure, I guess, is how I could best describe it. But, I fully acknowledge that the Migos isn't the most conscious music that exists today. But, I feel like I'm sometimes kind of like the litmus test for the Illuminati agenda, because things that I've always been interested. As I'm researching and understanding this occult stuff, I'm starting to realize like, oh man, all the stuff that I'm drawn to is kind of embedded into this sort of dark realm of the occult. So rap music, as it is my favorite genre, is no doubt the most connected form of music to this Illuminati agenda and conspiracy for, what have you. There's these ideas of symbolism and why we see it. There is conditioning of the masses. There's the privatized prison industry. I mean, the list goes on and on. But rap music is by far the most used music in this sort of subconscious battle between good and evil.
Right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you because I know a lot of people that know lots about hip-hop, other DJs, music fans. They know all about the history, they know the key players and all the trends, but they don't really have a grounding in truth, conspiracy issues, and they can't frame it in the context of what's happening in the wider world, the stuff that you don't hear about through the mainstream media. And then similarly, I know a whole load of people that do have a great hold on all of that, but they know bugger all about hip-hop, and you can't really have a conversation with them about the key players in this game because they don't know who any of them are and they don't understand how the culture came about. So it's good to be able to put those elements together when we chat. That's something that's really valuable. And maybe we should just start by finding out what you've been up to since we last spoke. What sort of projects have been on your agenda and what's on your radar generally at the moment? What sort of things have you been looking at?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's been a crazy few years. I think when I came on your show 3 years ago, I had maybe just released the hip-hop conspiracy book called Sacrifice Magic Behind the Mic. And then what happened after that was it caught on. I caught the attention of the producer for the All Out show, which is a hip-hop themed show on Eminem's Shade 45 channel on Sirius XM. And they reached out to me and wanted me to go on the show to talk about my book. Now, if anyone's familiar with the show, I just so happened to be because I listened to it every day when I was driving home from work. It features two hosts at the time. It did Rude Jude, who was the guy made famous from the '90s show, the Jenny Jones show. He was basically the guy who would be rude, right? That's his name, Rude Jude. And he would kind of make fun of people or whatever. But him and another guy who's kind of close connected into the sort of golden age of hip hop, Lord Sear, he was a DJ. They had this show. So I went out to the studio, I went on there, and, they had a show a segment called Conspiracy Talk. And it was only a few episodes that featured this. In fact, Greg Carlwood from the Higher Side Chats was a guest on one of the other episodes. But anyway, so I went out there and I kind of knew that this was going to be a hack job of sorts. I knew that Jude was going to be skeptical because that's kind of the way he is. He was actually very, friendly and nice in the studio with me. But, when we went live, it was, they let all these phone callers through that were, trying to tear me down, tear down the theories involved. But a lot of people don't understand is these more I don't want to say famous, the more mainstream popular entertainment shows, they're not like the podcast that everyone's listening to right now, where, you and I have a conversation, you ask me a question and I get to respond for 5 to 10 minutes or whatever this is. They're meant to be short, cut off answers. And, it's kind of like if you listen to Howard Stern, he doesn't really let them finish all the time. And it's just the way it is in entertainment once you get into like sort of the big leagues, I guess. So I learned a great lesson from that now that if I were to go on another, very popular show like that, to have kind of more concise answers. But they had many callers trying to say I was crazy, and it just opened my eyes up to how difficult this whole thing is. It's very difficult to open up people's minds to these ideas we're talking about. What's crazy about it is that the November 2016 in America, we had the U.S. elections and Donald Trump got in and people were upset about that. I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump, for the record, but um, the fake news fallout that happened after that made it so that conspiracy-minded people such as myself, who are just trying to find an honest answer and truth in all of this, because, no matter what the answer is, I just want to know the truth as to how deep this deception goes. But this fake news thing started an attack on people like myself, and they are using Google and YouTube to punish us now. And it's because we're not the official story that they once shared. Now, however, if you look at the most recent news of things that are going on, you find out that the conspiracy people have been right for so long. You look at all of the sexual abuse in Hollywood with Harvey Weinstein, Charlie Sheen and Corey Haim. That was just recently that it was alleged that Charlie Sheen was the one, I guess, allegedly molesting Corey Haim. And these are all things that conspiracy theory people have been talking about for years. Bill Cosby. I mean, these are all, you go online, you can find the articles talking about all this stuff well before it happened. Now, me personally, I don't have that many like inside sources that I've got this, I don't have this vast knowledge of secrets of Hollywood or whatever. But people like me, I research the occult and the symbols and their meaning and why they're doing it. And you can sort of build a hypothesis of why this is happening and where they're trying to take us. And I think it's curious that we are now being punished and being called fake news, even though there are some fake news websites. Like I will acknowledge that websites like Your Newswire, that's fake news. They say stuff and it discredits the whole community.
That's right.
And I read an article on Your Newswire about, they were saying Lady Gaga said that, she took a satanic pact or whatever, and now she was being punished with fibromyalgia. And I researched it. I watched the whole documentary that they were talking about. There was nothing of the sort. I emailed the journalist. I tweeted the journalist the questions. Where did you hear about this? Who's your source or whatever, anything. And they didn't, no response.
There was a so-called journalist by the name of Baxter Dimitri, right?
Yes.
Well, Your Newswire is actually run by a guy called Sean ADL Tabatabai, who was the webmaster for David Icke for a number of years, about 7 or 8 years, I think. And he was also the chief moderator of the David Icke Forum on his website. He was also the partner that David Icke launched the People's Voice TV project with in 2014, and Sean ended up being the sole director of that operation when it spectacularly flopped the following year in 2015. And I was actually a part of that operation, unfortunately, not realising the true nature of it. I used to present my Sound of Freedom show on it, so I've got some working knowledge of the whole thing. And according to many, it was just set up to fail from the start. The whole thing was just a mess. There were so many things going wrong with it. Nothing about it seemed right. And when it finally went down, there was the small matter of many, many thousands of pounds in public donations, which had been given good-naturedly by people to support the station, which were unaccounted for. There was no adequate accounting to show where all this money had been spent. It just disappeared, as did Sean and his new husband, a guy by the name of Sinclair. Those two had some kind of pioneering gay marriage in the UK. I can't remember the exact details, but there was something groundbreaking about it, and he used the People's Voice to parade that all over the headlines. So those two relocated to Los Angeles, and the next thing you know, we have this website, Your Newswire, which has sprung up, and as you say, it's blatant disinformation. Some of the stories are just completely absurd, and it smacks of being set up to discredit genuine truth and conspiracy researchers by making us all look nuts and crazy and stupid, because so many of the stories can be obviously disproven. And many of the stories are written by a woman by the name of Carol ADL Tabatabai, who turns out to be Sean's mum. So what kind of setup is that? And what a way to make a living, knowingly peddling disinfo like that. So that's what that organisation is all about. I've seen many people sharing Your Newswire stories online over the past couple of years, and I want everyone to know that this is what this operation is all about. And it does none of us any favours for their information to be shared like that. It's been cited in the mainstream media as an example of a fake news website, and maybe that was the intention with it all along.
Yeah, I find that interesting too, because, you know, David Icke, he was one of the first to kind of wake me up to the idea that there is an agenda going on. And after researching for so much, I don't know that I think he's on the right track. Some of his stuff I disagree with. I think he takes it into a realm that's sort of set up as a trap for us when he starts talking about these sort of aliens or this new age sort of line of thought that he goes into. But for the most part, I like David Icke. I really do. But yeah, I do remember the People's Voice. I remember there was donation channels set up for the thing, and I was really excited for it. I had no idea that segued into your Newswire, because that's extra curious, because it makes me wonder if it's not a disinformation sort of channel, because it, like you said, it totally destroys genuine research and genuine ideas, because now they're lumping us all together and they're punishing us, essentially. A lot of people don't understand the business side of all of this, because that's why when Donald Trump was running, there was all these like Russian fake news websites selling fake articles. They were advertising it on Facebook, because people can, if you can drive enough traffic to your website, you make money off these ads. And you know, and that's what I imagine your Newswire is doing, is they don't care what they're saying. They're just saying rubbish to get people to click on the ads and go to their website, and they make, 5 cents or whatever it is, that clickbait. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're no better or worse than BuzzFeed, though, too. I mean, BuzzFeed does the same thing, but yet they're viewed upon as a sort of legitimate source of news now for some reason. To finish that thought, I feel like the lesson I received when I went out to the studio at Shade 45 there was that we are a lot further behind the curve than I thought we were to get people to understand what this whole concept is, because it's so foreign to so many. That's the first hurdle. But the second hurdle, which is probably the bigger one, is this sort of cognizant dissonance where people they've been conditioned to automatically reject some of these theories and ideas through social conditioning. And that's the big problem. And I wish I knew the way forward with that. That's why I try to be the voice of sort of rational, reasonable ideas with, citations to the actual literature. Like my most recent book, we're talking about things I've done in the last few years. I wrote a couple books, but my most recent one's called The Dark Path. And in it, I go through a sort of more comprehensive view of everything that I think is going on, why I believe it, the history of the occult, and where they want to take us, and how they use instruments like, music videos, celebrities, entertainment, all these sort of, films. They use all this stuff to condition the masses to reject these Illuminati conspiracy theories, because I think we got to crack the door open to get people's minds ready to receive this information without instantly rejecting it. Because I've tried to have these conversations with so many people about all these topics, and it's very difficult to crack the nut, so to speak.
Well, thinking about the hip-hop genre in particular, or what's loosely termed hip-hop, because it's so unrecognisable from what went before, as we've previously discussed, in terms of the lyrics that are going into the records, the imagery that's going into the videos, what the artists are being used to promote on an extracurricular basis. There's so many elephants in the room. There's so many things that should be obvious to any fans of this music or any onlookers. People should be screaming it from the rooftops and alerting people to what this scene is being used for, and yet you hear nothing. And you've got radio stations, TV stations, magazines that pride themselves on supposedly having their finger on the pulse of hip-hop culture and priding themselves on letting you know what's going on, and they're just avoiding all this stuff. They're not talking about where the culture is going, which, in my view, it's devolving. It's becoming more and more debased, more and more degenerate, and it's so obvious to see. I mean, a real elephant in the room that maybe we should start off discussing is how this genre is being used to further the transgender agenda, which is definitely, undeniably going on in culture. You've got the homosexualization of hip-hop, the feminization of black males. And this can be seen in the large number of rappers that are now being photographed and appearing in video shoots and stuff like that, wearing women's clothing. So I've got a list of it going into the next book. Niles Barkley star CeeLo Green appeared in a photo shoot wearing a wedding dress. ASAP Rocky donned a dress. Lil Wayne has performed topless and wearing women's leopard print leggings, as has Will Smith's son Jaden. Young Jock turned up at an industry event wearing a dress. Young Thug has appeared in a photo shoot dressed as Little Bo Peep, for God's sake, with ribbons in his hair and a skipping rope, and he'd previously worn a leopard print dress. Little Uzi Vert is keen on rocking women's stuff too. So, you know, this never used to happen. This never used to happen, and it's happening now. And whenever I see that, it's a red flag.
Well, I'm familiar with your stance on this, and I'm with you where it's not. It's a hard topic because, again, you know, social conditioning tells us to, not accept talking about some of these ideas, because I support the LGBTQ community. I'm all for people's rights to, be with whoever they want. Like I do not care. I don't take a religious stance on it. I think God made everybody, and if some people came out different, then whatever. Now, that being said, you talked about Young Thug. I think it's interesting that here we have a rapper he's kind of a gangster rapper. So, he talks about the stuff one would expect. And, in fact, he was even, I don't want to use the wrong verbiage, but he was allegedly part of some sort of shooting with Birdman and Lil Wayne with he had a guy who was allegedly a shooter in one of his videos. And so the guy is, talking about a lot of these gangster things, but like you said, he shows us these sort of images that make us question his sexuality. He's wearing nail polish. He's wearing dresses. He's wearing a Hooters tank top in one of his videos. He's wearing lipstick. He's doing the whole thing. In fact, there was even one time on his social media, he had a picture uploaded, and in the background, you can clearly see there is gay pornography, male-on-male pornography playing in the background. Sure. So the question is, what is this guy? What is his purpose? Is he just into this stuff and he's gay and isn't vocal about it? Or is he implanted into the industry? Because you and I know there's so much propaganda placed into entertainment that I wonder if, because the rap community, I don't want to stereotype, but the rap community is sort of more homophobic than most.
Well, yeah, it's a genre that's always been full of alpha male bravado and machismo, and now it's not. So it's changed very radically, and whenever a scene does, I think people would do well to ask why that is, because these changes are not coming from the artists themselves expressing themselves naturally the way they feel to, but according to agendas. It's always agendas, and I think people need to be concerned about that.
Yeah, and I think figures like Young Thug, or more recently Little Uzi Vert, who we can talk about in a minute, a lot of these artists, they're so like someone chooses for these artists to be the ones that make it big, because honestly, I've listened to enough music to know that you can play a song that, like Little Uzi Vert's a great example. I listened to his first couple songs and I was like, what is this garbage? Who likes this? And I listen, inevitably you get me to listen to the song 5, 6, 7 times. Now I'm like, I kind of like this guy. He's pretty cool, and I find myself listening to it. That's how they get you. And I think you might have even talked about it in your first book as well, as I talked about in Sacrifice. there's a study done that says like they understand how the mind works. All they have to do is play a song a few times, get you to listen to it a few times, and that has sort of a I don't know, frequency following response where your mind is conditioned for it, and now it wants more of it. It kind of knows what the next lyric is going to be or the next melody, and that's how it works. So basically, what I'm saying is anything could be popular, and I know that I could even be conditioned to like, any song. We'll say country music because I don't like country music, but if I listen to country music for 2 weeks in a row, I'll bet I'd start enjoying it. So someone decides who gets the keys to the kingdom here, because I mean these people get treated like quite literal gods on earth. So then we go into the ideas of, well, how do they choose who gets these opportunities? And there's sexual abuse going on, and people that, they take the Faustian bargain and sell their soul supposedly. And Young Thug, I think his role, or maybe even Lil Uzi Vert or some of these other artists that are wearing women's clothes, much like Dave Chappelle talked about many years ago when he walked away from millions of dollars and said that there was something sick and wrong with the industry and that they make these people wear dresses, these men. I think they are here to start evolving the masses. And then the question is, well, why? Why do they want these alpha males in the rap industry to be accepting of homosexuals? Now, on one hand, you could say, well, because it's not right to discriminate and stereotype and, hate a whole, gender or sexual preference of people, which I agree with. Like, sure, yeah, agreed. We need to kind of evolve people to be more accepting of others. On the other hand, there's this line of thought, a very direct, provable line of thought that takes us back through all these occultists who all sought to bring about different ideas. And one of these ideas was this alchemical reconciliation of opposites. It's embodied in that Baphomet, the goat with the breast that you see on the Church of Satan logo. It is this concept that they can create a sort of new race, a new perfected being, and they can right all the wrongs that God, did. They can bring about what we call the transhuman. It's this new entity, and some claim that it comes from these androgynous aliens from the Sirius constellation. Some say it came from Atlantis, but there's this whole study of thought talking about how these androgynous or not hermaphroditic entities existed, and that is the perfected being. So from the most sort of paranoid occultist perspective, they're showing us men in dresses, alpha men at that, in dresses, to start opening our minds up to this concept.
Well, it's Satanism by any other name, and I'm referring to Satanism not in any religious sense, but meaning that which is in opposition to what occurs naturally in creation. These dark occult practitioners that we have like to take things that are inherent in nature, such as the masculine and feminine elements that are present, that were put into place by the Creator, and to twist and invert it and turn it on its head and change it into something that is not natural, that is completely 180 degrees different to what was there before. That seems to be what their mindset and their ideology is all about, and we're just seeing expressions of it in culture, in everyday life, everywhere you look.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that when you look at it, when we say something is satanic, people generally take it to be, oh, okay, here, this guy's a Christian and he is on his on his Bible right now. But when you look at what these occultists believe in, they don't believe that there is this horned, guy with a pitchfork. They do subscribe to the archetype of Satan. They subscribe to the adversary, and that is the exact idea you were talking about there. It's this idea that we need to embrace whatever the opposite is. So we need to invert crosses. We need to create a new race. It's anything that's in defiance of God or Christianity.
Yeah, well, that's where transhumanism comes in, which is all about creating a new style of human, which is different to what we are naturally.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they want to ultimately make man become God, and I think they figured out a sort of close way of doing that with entertainment because of these celebrities who, I mean, they live the lifestyle of being a god. They get to do and say pretty much whatever they want. I mean, look at Harvey Weinstein. People were, and Bill Cosby. These guys were allegedly raping women for just years and years. And even the I think it was the New York Times tried to publish an article about it, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, and it got watered down and diluted and sent to the, back of the newspaper because of the power these people wield. So I think transhuman is a way of trying to make a more literal version of God where we can become immortal through the incorporation of robotic and, man-made digital, I don't know what you want to call apparatuses. So yeah, to tie that back into hip hop, they're conditioning the minds and the masses to accept things that typically were rejected in the past. And what kind of makes me sad is that, some of these ideas are I'm supportive of some of these ideas of, because you look at the facts about, the gay community, you've got like higher rates, or the transgender community, I should say, they've got higher rates of suicide. The gay community is victims of bullying. When I went to high school, there was a guy who, this is in the 90s, there was a guy who wore a dress to school just to, make a statement that, whatever, I don't know, just to get attention. But like, he was under a real threat. People were following him around school like they wanted to beat him up. Thank God nobody did. But, but the point being is that some of these ideas are, it's like, it's good that they're trying to make people accept everyone. The problem is, where does the line divide the difference between let's just accept everybody for who they are versus, well, we're going to eventually take you down this path of becoming digital consciousnesses because we want to destroy, all religions and make man the new form of God.
Well, my only concern is always when something shows all the signs of having been put into place by one of the groups, one of the agencies, one of the institutions that makes these kinds of things happen. As we know, there are such organisations that specialise in culture creation and steering lifestyles and value systems and belief systems off in a certain desired direction. So we're not talking about individual choices that people are making for themselves here. We're talking about these choices being made for them. People don't realise how they're coerced into adopting these mindsets, largely through entertainment, through having these ideas subliminally planted in their minds. And I'm casting my mind back to the late 90s when there was talk within the hip-hop community of there being a gay rapper. So the idea was there was a prominent hip-hop MC who was gay. And back then, this was big news. It was a major thing. Everyone was speculating on who it might be because it was so unusual in that scene. But here we are in 2017, and it's no longer news. There's a number of rappers that have come out as gay. There are a number of others who show all the signs of being so. And this is not any kind of judgment, by the way, from me. Anyone's sexuality and lifestyle choices is their own business. And so long as it causes no harm to anyone else, it's not a problem. It only becomes a problem when it starts causing harm. And the groups that are cultivating this type of thing and getting it popularised and getting it trendy are not groups that have humanity's best interests at heart. They're not out for the upliftment of all mankind. So that's where the concerns lie. Just my personal observation on it.
And you're right. There's so many gay rappers now that it's kind of staggering because you're right, maybe as recent as, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that wouldn't really fly in the rap community. But now there's so many of them. I think there's this new genre of rapper called like SoundCloud rappers. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's these, yeah, it's it kind of blows my mind because like you listen to some of it and it's pretty bad. Like it's pretty poorly put together. But there's rappers like Little Peep, who's this white kid with like tons of face tattoos, and he's bisexual. I mean, a lot of these people, they used to have kind of like a reputation to, for people to, respect or listen to you. But not anymore. I see white kids, talking about shooting people, and they're using the N-word on the rap songs. And I'm like, dude, like, what is going on? Like, and these people have millions and millions of views and followers on YouTube. There's this, and they're getting younger too. Like there's this rapper named TK. I want to say he was 16 maybe when he caught some charges for I think it was capital murder, and he fled. He had a house arrest on his ankle. He cut it off, and he went on his Twitter feed and was like, I cut my monitor off. I'm out of here. And he was on the run from the police, and he made a whole song and video called The Race about his run from the police. And, that's a song that they play on Sirius XM now. I mean, it's just a very weird genre now, because anybody with any sort of access to the internet can become a celebrity now. It's very strange.
Yes, madness. And I would be asking the same question of any kind of trend that emerged out of this scene all of a sudden. Just supposing there was a whole bunch of vegan rappers that came through, much as I would applaud that kind of lifestyle choice, if there were a large number of MCs that came out proclaiming to be vegan, I would want to know why they'd all emerged at that time and what was behind that trend. And supposing you had a whole bunch of Chinese rappers, let's say a whole world of Chinese rappers came through all at the same time, I will be asking the same question there. Why is it there's so many Chinese rappers? Where have they all come from? What is the purpose for them emerging all at the same time? Whenever anything shows signs of being part of an agenda, I want to know about it, and people should.
That's very well said, Mark. That's very well said. I like those analogies, because that's exactly what's happening, and it's very politically incorrect for us to talk about how some of these rappers are gay, and I get that. I get that that's a sensitivity. I get that people think that people are being homophobic, because we can take your same argument and look at the idea of Luciferian rappers, because now you've got Little Uzi Vert, and if his name was chosen because you say it fast, it's Lucifer, and you can hear him do it at the beginning of one of his most recent songs. I've got it on my YouTube channel. I've got a video called "Is Little Uzi Vert in the Illuminati?" and you can hear him clearly say his name fast, and it sounds just like Lucifer. And there's also another rapper named Triple X Temptation. It's these goofy names these people come up with, but he, here's a guy who allegedly was, I guess, beating up his girlfriend or something. But anyways, his name translated is 666 Temptation. So you've got a pass for these Luciferian rappers, and to add on to your argument, it's like, okay, so why all of a sudden do we see these certain themes in hip hop? Who made this happen? Why are certain people given this pass to do this?
And in line with many male artists coming out as gay, you've also had a bunch of female artists appearing very masculine in their overall demeanour and their style, very aggressive, very macho. So I'm thinking about names like Angel Hayes, Azalea Banks, Melange Levon, Temper, Die Burger, Goddess and She, Roxanne, Kin for Life. They're very kind of full-on and macho as female artists. And another thing is, you mentioned the crazy names of certain artists, and I've looked at the way that certain artists' names are spelt and the way they're rendered and given to us. And we've got all kinds of crazy spellings and mixing up of letters and symbols and numbers. So I've listed a few here. The likes of Will I Am is well known, of course, will.i.am, which comes as a kind of web address or an IP address or something. Then you've got the artist Young Bane, where you've got an X after the Y, so it's YXNG. Not even sure how you're supposed to pronounce it, but presumably Young. And then ASAP Ferg and ASAP Rocky, They've got the dollar sign in place of the S. You've got Tide dollar sign as well, of course, which is the artist name. You've got Cash with 2 H's at the end. Lotto Boys with 2 Z's at the end. The Weekend has the E missing at the end of weekend for some reason, so it's KND. Designer with 2 I's in the middle. Made in TYO, which is all one word. Manek, I Love McConnon, which is all one word. They all look like somebody fell asleep over a computer keyboard, and it puts me in mind of, you know, texting speak and Twitter speak, where people don't bother spelling out names in full or words in full. They leave out letters, they put numbers instead of where letters should be going. It all strikes me as a measure to make young people kind of illiterate and to stifle them from being able to express themselves properly, just restricting them in the language they can use and corrupting the language. It just seems to be another aspect of what's being done with all these ridiculous artist names.
I think you're right. I like your theory on it when you talked about it being a sort of newspeak, because it doesn't make any sense. I don't know how to say half these damn names at this point, much less know how to spell them. And I don't really understand why that's a thing, but it is. And there's another one.
What's with all the littles and youngs as well? You know, little Lil and young YUNG, little this, young that. What's that all about?
Yeah, and there's another one, Ski Mask, the Slump God, and there's dollar signs instead of S's. Like, I don't even know what the hell that means. Like, but it's a very odd time to be into the hip hop community. There's another rapper, Ab Soul is his name, and he's got an album called Do What Thou Wilt, and it's this whole dedication to Aleister Crowley. And this is a pretty famous rapper. Like, if you listen to rap music, you've heard Ab Soul before. I mean, he's more of what you would call maybe a backpack rapper, I would think, because he's not necessarily mainstream. But I think that they want people to follow his lead. I think he's even got the tattoos on his arm of the Freemason compass and square and the all-seeing eye. His album's obviously dedicated to Crowley. I think on his back he's got a tattoo of Do What Thou Wilt. They want the conscious sort of group, you know, what's left of them. They want them to evolve into or study occult teachings, is what I would think.
Yeah, and you get a lot of rap artists that are thought of as conscious rappers. You know, they stay outside of that normal corporate agenda. They're thought of as making more conscious, meaningful message music. But when you do the digging, you find that many of those are compromised in their own ways as well, and they've got suspect affiliations. One that springs to mind is Common. You know, he put out a track in 2008 called Universal Mind Control, and the title kind of speaks for itself, as does the video. The music was very electronic and kind of transhuman in nature. You got Erykah Badu, who has been pictured on one of her album sleeves with a monarch butterfly, which is a symbol of mind control programming, and she appeared in a Janelle Monáe video, which was absolutely replete with mind control symbolism. You've got Jay Electronica, you know, very enigmatic dude, makes very different music, but you've got the puzzling aspect of his relationship with Kate Rothschild. He was going out with, you know, a Rothschild heiress for a period. So what's that all about? How do you reconcile a meaningful, conscious rapper going out with somebody like that? Maybe these artists are just as compromised as their more obvious counterparts, but just in different, more subtle kind of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, when you talk about mind control, it can quickly segue into how these people that are victims of mind control oftentimes are depressed or have suicidal tendencies. And that's another trend in hip hop that I believe is going to be the next sort of wave. They've taken what was sort of the emo rock movement and put it into rap music, because Lil Uzi Vert and Lil Peep, on their songs, they talk about killing themselves, and they're popularizing these suicidal thoughts, which takes you into the philosophy of nihilism. And nihilism appears very much connected to the overarching agenda of the Illuminati, or whatever you want to call this group, whoever the thought controllers are. And what that is the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, and it basically kind of says God is dead. There's no point to any of this. It's sort of throwing your hands up and saying, whatever, who cares about anything.
There's always prevalent in punk, the nihilistic outlook, and to a certain extent in grunge as well.
Yeah, and another idea, when you talk about mind control, is Kanye West. Everyone's familiar with him, very famous rapper. But this guy, man, I bet he's got a story to tell if he could tell it. He was he was more of a conscious backpack rapper when he started, and eventually he got hooked up with Kim Kardashian, which begs of some kind of media manipulation itself. But in the early, I'd say around 2013 or so, he started talking to different interviewers about sort of what they were calling rants in the mainstream media. They were saying he was losing his mind. But if you listen to what he was saying that there was an elite group that controls the masses through symbols. And that's exactly what a lot of us are seeing in the research. And, I don't think Kanye West is as crazy as people make him out to be. I think he's just more aware or closer or exposed to this Illuminati agenda of occultism, and he knows what's going on. And I don't know that he's able to handle that too well. He's had these supposed breakdowns where allegedly they take him because he shut down his most recent St. Pablo concert abruptly right after another one of these rants. And supposedly they put him in the hospital where some of the MK Ultra projects had happened at one time. I don't know if there's a real solid link to, meaning that they, mind controlled him one more time, but he sort of fell off the radar since then. So I'm curious as to what's going to happen to Kanye West, because I think this guy knows a lot about what's going on, and he's having a hard time, or they won't allow him to spread it. So I wouldn't be shocked if, something bad happened to him. I hope not, but I think this guy's too much of a gamble for the Illuminati.
Well, actually, a lot of what he's had to say recently has parallels with the sort of stuff Michael Jackson was coming out with in his latter years, when he described Sony as evil and Tommy Mottola as the devil, and he was talking about how the history books have been manipulated and they've been changing history. Kanye's been talking in very much the same way in many of these rants. Then you can consider Prince, when he went on that Tavis Smiley talk show back in 2009 and started referencing chemtrails and this conversation he'd had with Dick Gregory about what's really going on in the world. It's interesting to note what happens when artists go off script and start talking about things that their overlords would prefer them not to.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I'm concerned about Kanye. I wish that we could get him sort of on our side, so to speak, but I think they scared him to death, honestly, back when Kim Kardashian was in Paris and she got robbed. I've got a video on this on my YouTube channel too, but because I've got a video clip from the news. The whole deal was, the official story was that Paris Hilton, getting my puppets confused. So Kim Kardashian was in this sort of apartment for wealthy people, which had no security cameras apparently, which is quite interesting. But a couple people robbed her apartment. They showed up on bicycles, stormed their way into the apartment. She just so happened to be alone, and they taped her up and put her in the bathtub. Now it was after this that Kanye West had his breakdown, because I believe that they were threatening her much like Whitney Houston and Bobby Christina, where they put her in the bathtub to threaten her life, because in terms of occultism, the bathtub represents the cleansing ritual before going to the other side. That's something that they do in witchcraft. So I think if I was to conjecture, that's what truly happened there, because none of that story, a lot of the story doesn't really make sense. Much like a lot of the events that we see, sort of like the murder of Tupac, right? This guy gets shot down on the Vegas Strip after a Mike Tyson fight on a Saturday night. No one saw anything. No one has a clue as to who did it. Come on. It is. So, a lot of this stuff, the conspiracy community won't let go. And I think that that's a valuable service, but the powers that be want us to sort of go away so that they can have their story be the only story.
Yeah, I remember you did an article on your site a while back on the symbolic relevance of all these artists appearing in bathtubs, being photographed in bathtubs in some circumstance or other. Many of them were bathing in blood, and there's a huge number of artists that have been pictured in this way.
Right, and that plays into Kanye West as well, because in ritual Kabbalism, they do a supreme invoking ritual of the pentagram. And what this is they've got a certain corner of their pentagram symbolic of water, because each corner represents a different element. So the top right corner represents water. And if you look at the inverted triangle, that also represents water. And it's represented by the cardinal direction of west. So the direction of north is symbolic of earth, and it's an inverted triangle with a line through it. So when we look at Kim and Kanye's baby, its name is Northwest. When you look this up in Wiccan ideas, there's two cardinal directions, and you can see that north is a symbol for wealth and feminism, and west represents the subconscious feminine aspects. So northwest symbolizes a powerful female who's able to work in the subconscious realm. And, it just so happens to be that Kanye West, just before all that, before they named their child, was talking about the power of symbols controlling us. And when, like you said, with the bathtub, there's all these, ASAP Rocky's got a video with the bathtub, and he's also got a video with the pentagram, like an Enochian sort of ritual pentagram. And there's, Jim Morrison died in a bathtub. Lady Gaga's always being shown in bathtubs.
There's Whitney and Bobby Christina.
Whitney and Bobby Christina, and the whole Whitney Bobby Christina. I'm sure many of your listeners already know this story, but when Whitney died, just one night prior in the same hotel, her daughter was with her, in different rooms, and her daughter was passed out in a bathtub, and they had to revive her. She almost died one night prior, and then the next night, Whitney Houston dies in the bathtub. Then 2 years later, whatever it was, then Bobby Christina dies in a bathtub. Like, it's so crazy. It's like, and no one was really talking about this stuff.
It's another elephant in the room.
It's the elephant in the room, right? Like, why? Why is this happening? Does anyone else find this strange?
I just want to speak for a short while about an event which happened earlier this year, which was the death of Mobb Deep's Prodigy. So he passed away on the 20th of June in a Las Vegas hospital. We're told of sickle cell anemia, this medical condition that he'd had all his life. Certainly it was well known that he had. He'd battled with this since birth. It was even referenced on a couple of diss tracks, most notably on Hit 'Em Up by Tupac. He takes a dig at Prodigy's sickle cell condition. But there are many strange elements to it, not least the fact that Prodigy had become very outspoken about what he termed the Illuminati, the New World Order, the controlling elites of this world. He is reckoned to be the first rapper to have referenced the Illuminati on track. So a couple of suspicious things were the fact that he died on the 20th of June, which is just before the summer solstice, and as we well know, these occult practitioners that preside over these industries love their significant dates, equinoxes and solstices and such. And also, he died the day after World Sickle Cell Awareness Day, which seems a bit kind of like morbid mockery in the circumstances. So, did you look much into that whole scenario and some of these suspicious elements of it?
I often wonder what conversations are happening in the afterlife with Tupac and Prodigy when, Tupac on his diss record talked about how Prodigy had sickle cell, but Prodigy made it 20 more years than Tupac did. So I wonder if that's but that whole thing with Prodigy is crazy. And, the fact that this guy was pretty much the only rapper talking about the Illuminati on the level that he did. And as a small segue, I don't know if people listen to Migos. That's one of the more popular rap groups now. One of the members of the group, Offset, he, keep a lookout for this guy because he sort of throws in little jabs talking about the Illuminati and talking about how certain rappers are satanic and whatnot. So I think Offset's going to be, I don't know, I can say he's going to be the new Prodigy, but he's showing signs that maybe he's going to be one that talks against this whole thing. But yeah, so Prodigy was kind of the most vocal rapper about this whole thing, and everyone knows the line of Illuminati want my mind, soul, and my body that he made famous in the 90s. And before he died, he was working on some kind of stage play about the Illuminati. The guy was very vocal about this concept. In fact, I was honored to be interviewed by Complex Magazine right next to Prodigy. We weren't in the same room or anything like that. But, so Prodigy and myself were talking about these Illuminati conspiracy theories in the Complex Magazine. It was this whole big article talking about the different ideas here. So I find it interesting that the guy dies at, I think he was only like 42 or 43. And the way he died was again like this crazy, they said he choked on an egg.
Yeah, that just seems like mockery to me as well. This guy's life ends when he chokes on an egg.
Yeah, it's very strange. And I know he had a pretty big following, but I don't know what the purpose would be to take him out, besides maybe not getting this play that he had in the works from coming out. Maybe that would be, if I was to come up with a conspiracy, that would be it.
I just wanted to discuss another couple of high-profile celebrity deaths this year as well. We're straying away from the world of hip-hop here to other music genres, but I saw that you had done a posting on this on your Illuminati Watcher blog, and that would be the passing of Chris Cornell, followed by Chester Bennington. A couple of months later, both said to have committed suicide. They were both friends, known to each other. They'd performed together. I think Chester Bennington was godfather to one of Chris Cornell's children. So very strange circumstances surrounding the deaths of these two. I just wonder what else you've uncovered about what may have been going on there.
All I've got on those would be the, when it happened, I immediately think about it because Chris Cornell, I think he was actually an Orthodox Christian, and that's, obviously frowned upon to commit suicide. But he also had diagnosed sort of depression. But he, his whole band had the Black Hole Sun song, which was an idea of nihilism again, or the Black Sun of Alchemy, which is the great work. But a lot of the symbols there suggest different ideas. Like his most recent album, it was his last album. I don't remember the name of it. Chris Cornell had it. It had a mountain that looked like a pyramid, and the rocket ship was going towards the apex of it, which had an illuminated sort of eyeball going up towards it. So it begs the question of if there weren't some revelations to be made from his last album. I don't really know. It's really hard to tell what to make of that. I don't recall that the date coincided with any ritualistic holidays like Prodigy with June 20th per se. But when these celebrities die, they die at very young ages, and it all points to this overarching conspiracy theory that there's something wrong with entertainment, and a lot of people can't seem to deal with it. And is it that fame is that tough to deal with? I certainly wouldn't know, but a more logical theory is rooted into the ideas of occultism and this idea of why these people get into this sort of thing where they're sexually abusing one another and people somehow remain quiet about it. There's something sick going on in the entertainment industry, and for some reason the mainstream media refuses to research it, which leaves people like you and I, the only voices that try to look into this kind of stuff.
Exactly. Well, a case in point on that front is the allegations that have come out against Africa Bambaataa, who's universally revered as one of the legends, the pioneers, the founding fathers of hip-hop culture. He's one of the big three, alongside Kool Herc and Grandmaster Flash, that you always hear spoken about in the same breath. So last year, spring 2016, a couple of accusers came forward, Ronald Savage, known as Bee Stinger, and this guy Hassan Campbell, known as Poppy. And they alleged that Bambaataa had sexually abused them when they were teenagers, minors, going way back 30, 35 years plus on an ongoing basis. And in the wake of that, further people have come forward and also said that Bambaataa had sexually molested them. There seems to have been a blanket of silence in the hip-hop community about this. Nobody seems to want to discuss it. Nobody seems to want to get to the bottom of it. It's another elephant in the room. The Universal Zulu Nation have not come out of this looking good, because initially they tried to deny it and they jumped to Bambaataa's defense, but it's since been shown that they tried to bribe one of these guys, Ronald Savage, with money to keep quiet and retract his story, and they've since issued an apology to the victims of Bambaataa's crimes, so that's more or less an admission. And, all these radio stations and TV stations and magazines just don't want to talk about this. And it's a very strange conspiracy of silence, because if this was any other music genre, just imagine if it was country music, for argument's sake, and instead of one of the pioneers of hip-hop, it was, let's say Willie Nelson or Kenny Rogers, somebody like that was getting accused. Can you imagine that the media would stay quiet about that? I think they would be all over it. And yet, with this scene, for some reason, nobody seems to want to go there. It's very strange to me.
It's really strange. I'm shocked by how these people can get away with it for so long in the mainstream media, who, they want us to rely on them to give us the sort of the journalism that investigates different ideas. They're totally failing us on this front. So I think if they want to get their sort of respect back, they have to start looking into these things, because, like I said earlier, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, even Dave Chappelle had something to say about what was going on in entertainment, yet, completely Kevin Spacey. Yeah. And a lot of these, like Jimmy Savile, David Icke was talking about him years prior to the revelations of him. It's like, how can people who are not in the mainstream media, who don't get paid to, research these things, how comes they're the only ones looking at it? Yet these people that want to be the go-to for information and news, like they're failing to do so. Why is that? Well, there's lots of sort of interests that go behind closed doors, so to speak, and that's why they get called the Illuminati. So
if you want to be a musician, the best thing that can ever happen is not getting signed to one of the big corporations. And if you want to be an actor, the best thing that can happen is not getting snapped up by Hollywood. But, staying outside of all of that, which is, again, a complete inversion of what we're trained to think of in society. But that's the truth of the matter.
Yeah, that's the lesson to be learned. Everyone says it, and for some reason, nobody wants to reveal what happens. So
yeah, how many little girls want to be the next Miley Cyrus? How many garage bands want to be the next U2? How many up-and-coming rappers want to be the next Jay-Z? Actually, you don't.
There's a price to be paid, apparently.
So what sort of stuff has been catching your eye recently in terms of contemporary stuff? What projects are you working on, and what have you been studying lately?
Well, I think Taylor Swift is going to be the new sort of Katy Perry. I think Katy Perry's on the way out as being the it girl. I think Taylor Swift is going to be the next sort of artist to watch. She's got this new album. Her first video was called "Look What You Made Me Do," and in it she shows these different alter egos. She says that the old Taylor Swift is dead, which is symbolic language we've heard many times in the past. It's where they start to bring about these alter egos or channel spirits or entities, which sounds absurd, but just this past Sunday on my my website, I published an article called Alma Deutscher, channeling the spirits and the occult source of creativity. And what that's about is this girl, she's a child prodigy on the piano. She, composed her own opera by like the age of 9, and she's very much in touch with something. They're calling her the next Mozart, and she was on 60 Minutes. And what followed made my jaw drop, because on the show, she talked about how she's channeling alter egos, which is a concept I talked about in Sacrifice Magic Behind the Mic. It's this idea that we often see from these entertainers who, like Beyonce, talks about channeling Sasha Fierce. Jay-Z talks about channeling the Rain Man demon. All these ideas. And here she is on mainstream TV on 60 Minutes saying that she does it. And the freaking host is clueless, and he's like, oh, she's got these invisible friends she talks to. And I wanted to I want to scream at the TV, like, no, dude, like she's channeling spirits from another dimension, because that's what they all say they do. And my YouTube channel has been under, I don't want to say attack, that makes me sound like a victim, but YouTube's been giving me copyright strikes, so I'm not able to publish a lot of the stuff that I used to. So I started a Patreon page, and the supporters who donate to my research, I gave them the video that shows these clips, and I'm talking about why this is a thing. So to bring it back to Taylor Swift, that's what she's getting ready to do. She just released another video called Ready for It, and there's all these symbols in it. I've got a whole, again, on the Patreon feed, I've got a video about it. And, she's on the video, you can clearly see it says they're burning all the witches, and she's standing, and then she ascends up towards the light in a transhuman agenda. But she's going to be the next one that's, she's going to have a new name soon, and she's going to say that she channeled some kind of spirit from the other realm. All this wacky stuff that, for whatever reason, the people in the mainstream media and the journalists, they don't ask why. They just say, oh, it's just some eccentric artist, It's like, no, dude, they're all saying it.
And I think in our last Good Vibrations conversation, you made the point that there's a very thin line between what appears to be mind control alters, dissociative personalities coming through, and possession by entities, Often it's difficult to tell whether you're seeing the result of mind control programming or whether there's something else inside of somebody that's been, placed there or manifested there in some way.
Right. And we need the journalists to research it. I mean, we don't need them. We can do it ourselves. But, our resources and connections are very limited compared to what they can do. But the problem is they don't. And then the question to be asked is why? Why don't they research this? Why don't they try to understand why this little girl is saying she channels a spirit? Why don't they research why Beyonce says, oh, I channeled this Sasha Fierce spirit through me? Why don't they ask her what exactly she means by that? And until they do so, that keeps us busy.
All right, man. Well, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks again for coming on today. Do you just want to remind people where they can go to find all your stuff online and your books and whatever other projects you've got going on?
Yeah, I'd love to. Let me. So I'm on all the social feeds. I've got a Instagram under Issac Weishaupt. Weishaupt is spelled Weishaupt. It is actually not my real name. Most of you already know that. We were joking about that earlier, but that's a pure pseudonym, Issac Weishaupt. But then I'm on Facebook, Illuminati Watcher, Twitter at Illuminati Eyes. I've got a email newsletter on IlluminatiWatcher.com. You can sign up for it. It's totally free. That gives you connected with the latest and greatest. I'm not working on any books at the moment. I just published a book called The Dark Path, which I consider my magnum opus. I believe it's the most clearly laid out understanding of what's going on. It's getting great reviews. Thank goodness. I appreciate that. All the people that are leaving reviews. I actually narrated all of my books, including The Dark Path, on audible.com. A lot of people like the audiobook option, so I did that. So you can find me all over those places. Plus, I'm on Patreon, which is the artist support system, because of the the fake news fallout. There's lots of I'm getting kind of punished by Google and YouTube for a lot of the stuff I'm saying. So I've had to resort to doing the Patreon thing, but it's actually got pretty good support. So, and I appreciate the heck out of the people that are on there for me. But yeah, I'm kind of all over the place. I've got a Pinterest too under Issac Weishaupt. I don't keep that one super active, but I try. There's a lot of social medias to keep up with. So, yeah, you can find me anywhere. If you want to get down to it, illuminatiwatch.com is my main website where I've got everything, including my own podcast, conspiracy theories, and unpopular culture.
All right, man. I love your work. Much respect.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Mark.
This is just for fun.
I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up